Victoria Sterling had one hand on her purse, ready to flee the worst blind date of her life, when the man's 8-year-old daughter leaned in and whispered something that made her forget how to breathe. The CEO sat frozen, staring at this small child who had just revealed the truth so devastatingly raw that leaving suddenly felt impossible. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Marcus Chun was 17 minutes late and he was running. His breath came in ragged gasps as he sprinted down Fifth Avenue, dodging clusters of evening pedestrians with the desperate agility of a man who had already lost too much in his life to lose this too. The restaurant, La Maison Bleue, was still 3 blocks away and his phone had died 20 minutes ago, which meant he had no way to call ahead, no way to explain, no way to do anything except run and pray that she would still be there. His dress shirt, the only good one he owned, was already damp with sweat beneath his jacket, and he could feel a blister forming on his heel where his rarely worn dress shoes rubbed against skin more accustomed to sneakers and work boots. None of it mattered. He had to get there. He had to try. The evening had started so differently. It had started with hope, that fragile, terrifying thing he had locked away in a box marked someday for the past 4 years. Ever since the day his wife walked out with nothing but a suitcase and a lawyer's number. Emma had been 6 then, barely old enough to understand why mommy wasn't coming back, why her room suddenly felt too big, why daddy cried in the shower when he thought she couldn't hear. Marcus had thrown himself into being both parents, working double shifts as a freelance graphic designer by day and picking up weekend gigs doing website maintenance for local businesses, all while making sure Emma had everything she needed. What he hadn't done, what he had deliberately carefully avoided, was let anyone else into their carefully constructed life until tonight. The blind date had been Rebecca's idea. Rebecca Park, his business partner and the closest thing he had to a best friend, had been nagging him for months. "You're 34, not 94, she had said over coffee 3 weeks ago, shoving her phone across the table to show him a dating profile. Her name is Victoria Sterling. She's a CEO. She's brilliant, she's beautiful, and she specifically said she admires single parents. Marcus, you deserve this. You deserve to feel like a man again, not just a dad." He had resisted, of course. He had 1,000 reasons why it was a bad idea, why the timing wasn't right, why Emma needed stability, not the chaos of him trying to date. But Rebecca had been relentless, and somewhere deep inside him, beneath all the fear and exhaustion, a tiny voice had whispered, what if? What if there was still a chance for him to have more than just survival? What if there was still room in his life for something like joy? So he had said yes. He had agreed to the blind date, carefully arranged by Rebecca, who apparently knew Victoria through some network of ambitious professional women. Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Dynamics, a tech company that Marcus had actually heard of, which meant it was successful enough to matter. The profile picture Rebecca had shown him revealed a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a smile that looked like it didn't come easily but was worth the wait. She's been single for 2 years, Rebecca had explained. Messy divorce, no kids, works too much. She's ready to meet someone real, someone who understands that life isn't perfect. You're perfect for each other. Marcus hadn't believed that for a second, but he had let himself imagine it just a little. The plan had been simple. Emma would stay with Mrs. Chun, their neighbor, a sweet Taiwanese grandmother who adored Emma and taught her to make dumplings every Sunday. Marcus would take the subway into Manhattan, meet Victoria at 8 o'clock at La Maison Bleue, and for 2 hours, he would not be Marcus Chun, the exhausted single dad. He would just be Marcus, a man having dinner with an interesting woman. It was supposed to be his first step back into the world of the living. Instead, it had become a disaster before it even began. Mrs. Chun had called him at 7:15, just as he was checking his reflection one last time in the bathroom mirror, making sure his tie was straight. "Marcus, I'm so sorry." Her voice had been tight with pain. "I fell. I think I twisted my ankle badly. I can't watch Emma tonight. I'm so sorry." The guilt in her voice had been excruciating, and Marcus had immediately told her not to worry, that he would figure it out, that she should rest and ice her ankle. He had hung up and stared at his phone, his mind racing through options. Rebecca was out of town. His parents lived 3 hours away. Every other parent he knew from Emma's school had their own Friday night plans. There was no backup, no safety net, and the clock was ticking toward 8. Emma had appeared in the doorway of his bedroom, her brown eyes wide and worried. She was 8 years old, small for her age, with her mother's delicate features and his own stubborn chin. She wore her favorite pajamas, the ones with stars all over them, and she was clutching Massar buttons, the stuffed rabbit she had slept with since she was 2. "Daddy, you look fancy," she had said, her voice small. "Are you going somewhere important?" He had knelt down in front of her, his heart breaking in his chest. "Sweetheart, I was supposed to go out tonight, but Mrs. Chun can't watch you anymore. It's okay, though. We can have movie night instead. How about that?" Her face had fallen, and in that moment she had looked so much older than 8. "You were going on a date," she had whispered. "Miss Rebecca told me. She said you were going to meet a nice lady." He had opened his mouth to explain, to tell her it didn't matter, but she had grabbed his hand with fierce determination. "Daddy, you have to go. You never go anywhere. You never do anything for you. I'll be okay. I'm a big girl." What happened next was a decision he would replay in his mind 1,000 times, wondering if it was the best choice or the worst mistake. He had looked at his daughter, at her earnest face and her 2 wise eyes, and he had made a choice born of desperation and hope in equal measure. "Okay," he had said slowly. "Okay, but you're coming with me." Emma had blinked in surprise. To your date? He had nodded. I'll explain to the lady that there was an emergency. You'll sit at a table nearby with your iPad and your headphone. You'll be good and quiet, and if it goes well, maybe she'll understand. If it doesn't, well, at least I tried. Is that okay with you? Emma had nodded so vigorously that Miss Brett Buttons had nearly fallen from her arms. I'll be so good, Daddy, I promise. She had thrown her arms around his neck and he had held her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and hoping against hope that he wasn't about to make a complete fool of himself. They had left the apartment at 7:30, which should have been plenty of time, but the subway had been delayed and then delayed again, some signal problem that left them stuck in a tunnel for 15 agonizing minutes while Marcus watched the time tick past 8 o'clock. Emma had sat beside him, swinging her legs and humming softly, completely oblivious to the panic rising in his chest. When they finally reached their stop, he had grabbed her hand and started running, half carrying her when her little legs couldn't keep up. I'm sorry, baby, he had gasped as they climbed the stairs to street level. We're late, we have to hurry. She hadn't complained once, just held tight to his hand and Miss Buttons and ran beside him. Now at 8:17, Marcus finally saw the restaurant. La Maison Bleu was exactly as fancy as he had feared. All soft lighting and elegant French script on the window. Through the glass, he could see well-dressed couples at intimate tables, wine glasses catching the light, the kind of refined atmosphere where a sweaty, out-of-breath man dragging an 8-year-old in star pajamas would be conspicuously out of place. He slowed to a walk, trying to catch his breath, trying to smooth down his hair. Emma looked up at him, her eyes worried. Daddy, you're all sweaty. He managed a shaky laugh. I'm a mess. Maybe this whole thing was a mistake. No, Emma said firmly. In that way, that made her sound like a tiny adult. You're gonna go in there and you're gonna meet the nice lady and you're gonna say you're sorry for being late and it's gonna be okay. Her confidence was absolute and it gave him just enough courage to pull open the restaurant door. The hostess looked up with a professional smile that faltered slightly when she saw Emma. Good evening. Do you have a reservation? Marcus nodded, suddenly aware of how hard his heart was pounding. Shun, I'm supposed to be meeting someone. Victoria Sterling. I know I'm late. The hostess checked her computer and something flickered across her face. Something that looked like sympathy or maybe pity. She glanced at Emma, then back at Marcus. Right this way. She led them through the restaurant and Marcus felt every eye followed. The elegant diners probably thought he was bringing his daughter to meet her new potential stepmother, and the absurdity of it all made him want to laugh or cry or both. They reached a table near the window where a woman sat alone and Marcus's breath caught in his throat. She was even more striking in person than in her profile picture, with sharp cheekbones and dark hair pulled back in a sleek bun. She wore a charcoal gray suit that screamed power and money, and she was staring down at her phone with the expression of someone who had been kept waiting and was not pleased about it. The hostess gestured to the table. Miss Sterling, your date has arrived. Victoria looked up and her eyes went from Marcus's flushed face to Emma's star-covered pajamas and stuffed rabbit. For a long, terrible moment, no one spoke. Then Emma, bless her fearless heart, stepped forward and stuck out her hand. Hi, I'm Emma. I'm really sorry we're late. My daddy was supposed to have a babysitter, but she got hurt and he didn't want to cancel on you because he said you sounded really nice and he's been looking forward to meeting you all week even though he was nervous. She took a breath, then added he really did try to get here on time. Victoria stared at Emma's outstretched hand and something complicated passed over her face. Surprise and confusion and something else Marcus couldn't quite read. Slowly she reached out and shook Emma's small hand. Hello, Emma. She looked up at Marcus and her expression was unreadable. Your daughter? Marcus felt his face burning. Yes, I'm so sorry, Miss Sterling. There was a last-minute emergency with childcare, and I didn't have your number to call, and I thought maybe if I just explained. He was fumbling for words, painfully aware of how ridiculous this all was. Emma squeezed his hand tighter and he looked down at her. Her eyes were bright with determination. She looked back up at Victoria and took a deep breath as if gathering all her courage. Then she leaned in close to Victoria and cupped her small hand around her mouth, whispering something that Marcus couldn't quite hear from where he stood. Whatever Emma said made Victoria's eyes go wide, her mouth falling open in shock. The color drained from her face and she stared at Emma as if the child had just revealed the secrets of the universe. The look of frozen disbelief on Victoria's face was so complete, so profound, that Marcus felt his stomach drop. What had Emma just said? Victoria Sterling had been preparing for this moment all week, though not in the way Marcus Chun might have imagined. She had not been excited, she had not been hopeful. She had been bracing herself for disappointment the way a soldier might brace for incoming fire. Her assistant, Jennifer, had somehow convinced her that meeting this graphic designer through a mutual connection was a good idea, that she needed to get back out there after the divorce. Victoria had agreed only because saying no would have required more energy than saying yes, and energy was something she rationed carefully these days. She had expected someone pleasant but boring, someone who would spend the evening trying to impress her with accomplishments that paled in comparison to her own, someone who would ultimately prove that she was better off alone. What she had not expected was a sweaty, late, desperate man clutching the hand of a child in pajamas. The little girl, Emma, had surprised her even more. Children usually made Victoria uncomfortable. They were unpredictable, loud, sticky-fingered creatures who asked inappropriate questions and cried at inconvenient moments. She had never wanted children of her own. a fact that had contributed significantly to the spectacular implosion of her marriage. Her ex-husband Richard had wanted a family, a legacy, someone to inherit the sterling name. Victoria had wanted her company, her freedom, her life on her own terms. The divorce had been brutal, public, and ultimately clarifying. She was 36 years old, and she had accepted that her path did not include a white picket fence and bedtime stories. Yet here was this child, this Emma, standing before her with enormous brown eyes and a stuffed rabbit, extending a small hand with the confidence of someone 3 times her age. Victoria had shaken that hand because not doing so would have been cruel, and whatever else she was not. She had looked up at Marcus, ready to deliver a polite but firm dismissal when Emma had leaned in close. The child's breath had been warm against her ear, carrying the faint scent of mint toothpaste, and what she whispered had not been a child's usual awkward attempt at adult conversation. "My daddy's heart is broken," Emma had said, her voice barely audible but crystal clear. "But he's the best person in the whole world. He reads me stories every night even when he's tired. He makes my lunch with little notes that say he loves me. He cries sometimes when he thinks I'm asleep because my mom left us and he thinks it's his fault, but it's not. He just loves too much. Please don't be mean to him. He doesn't have anybody except me and I want him to be happy." Victoria had frozen. She had spent 15 years building an empire, negotiating with venture capitalists and board members and competitors, learning to read people, to anticipate their move, to protect herself from manipulation and sentiment. Nothing in that experience had prepared her for an 8-year-old girl's raw, unfiltered plea. The words had hit her like a physical blow, not because they were manipulative, but because they weren't. Emma had not been trying to guilt her into staying. She had simply been telling the truth, offering up her father's broken heart like a fragile gift, trusting that Victoria would handle it with care. It was the trust that had undone her, that had left her sitting there with her mouth open, unable to form words. Marcus was staring at his daughter with a mixture of mortification and confusion. "Emma, sweetheart, what did you say?" His voice was strained, and Victoria could see the panic in his eyes. He thought his daughter had said something terrible, something that would end this disaster of an evening even more quickly. Victoria looked at Emma, at her hopeful face and her fierce protective love, and she made a decision that surprised even herself. She looked back at Marcus and said, "Your voice carefully controlled. She told me that you're afraid of dogs, that you had a bad experience as a kid and you still get nervous around them." Emma's eyes went wide, clearly startled by the lie, but Victoria gave her the tiniest shake of her head, a silent message. "This is our secret." Emma, bless her, understood immediately. She nodded solemnly. "Yeah, Daddy. I told her about the mean dog when you were little." Marcus blinked, clearly confused by this revelation. "I don't remember telling you that story." Emma shrugged with the easy flexibility of a child who knew when to adapt. "You told me lots of stories, Daddy." Victoria watched the exchange, fascinated despite herself. She gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Well, since you're here, you might as well sit down. We're already causing a scene." Marcus hesitated, looking around the restaurant at the curious stares. "Ms. Sterling, I really didn't mean to, Victoria," she interrupted. "Call me Victoria. And you're Marcus, correct?" He nodded, still looking like a man waiting for the other shoe to drop. "I'll tell you what," Victoria continued, her mind already forming a plan. "Emma can sit at that small table by the window." She pointed to a cozy corner spot with a view of the street. "The hostess can bring her some crayons and maybe some chicken fingers. We can have our dinner, and if it's terrible, you can leave after one course. If it's tolerable, we'll make it through dessert. Does that sound fair?" Marcus looked at her as if she had just offered him a life raft in the middle of a stormy sea. "You would really do that? You're not angry?" Victoria picked up her water glass and took a slow sip, buying herself time to understand why she was doing this. "Angry? No. Surprised? Yes. But I've sat through hundreds of terrible business dinners with people who bored me to tears. At least this will be interesting. Besides," she added, glancing at Emma, "your daughter has excellent manners. That's more than I can say for most adults I meet." Emma beamed at the compliment, and Victoria felt something strange and uncomfortable in her chest, something that might have been warmth. The hostess, who had been hovering nearby, quickly ushered Emma to the small corner table and returned with a kid's menu and a box of crayon. Emma settled in happily, setting Mrs. Buttons in the chair beside her and immediately beginning to draw on the paper placemat. Marcus sank into the chair across from Victoria, and up close, she could see the fine lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands as he unfolded his napkin. He wasn't classically handsome, not in the polished way her ex-husband had been, but there was something genuine in his face, an openness that made him seem younger than he probably was. "I really am sorry," he said quietly. "It's not how I imagined this evening going." "How did you imagine?" Victoria asked, genuinely curious. He gave a self-deprecating laugh. "Honestly, I imagined being too nervous to eat, saying something stupid, and you politely excusing yourself after the appetizer. I did not imagine bringing my daughter in her pajamas and arriving late looking like I just ran a marathon." Victoria allowed herself a small smile. "Well, you're right about one thing. You do look like you ran a marathon." A waiter appeared, mercifully interrupting the awkwardness. He took their drink orders, Marcus asking for water and Victoria ordering a glass of red wine, and left them with menus. For a moment they both pretended to study the elegant French description. Though Victoria suspected Marcus was as unable to focus on the words as she was, she broke the silence first. "So, graphic designer. Rebecca mentioned you do freelance work. He looked up, seeming grateful for the neutral topic. Yeah, I mostly do branding and web design for small businesses. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills and lets me work from home so I can be there for Emma. That must be difficult, Victoria said, and she meant it. Balancing work and single parenthood. Marcus shrugged. It is what it is. Her mom left when Emma was 6. Just decided one day that motherhood wasn't for her. Packed a bag and left a note. We haven't heard from her since. The casual way he said it, as if discussing the weather, made Victoria's chest tighten. I'm sorry, she said, and was surprised to find she meant it. No one should have to carry that alone. He met her eyes, and she saw something shift in his expression. A careful lowering of a guard. Thank you. Most people either pity us or judge me, assume I must have done something wrong to drive her away. But sometimes people just leave. Sometimes love isn't enough. Victoria knew that truth intimately. Her own marriage had ended not because of infidelity or cruelty, but because of incompatibility. Because two people had wanted fundamentally different things from life. My ex-husband wanted children, she heard herself say. I didn't. He thought I would change my mind. I didn't. So we spent 5 years making each other miserable before finally admitting defeat. She paused, then added, he's remarried now. To someone who gave him 3 kids in 4 years. I sent a baby gift for each one. Marcus studied her face. Do you regret it? Not having kids? It was a bold question, too personal for a first date, but Victoria found she didn't mind. I don't regret my choice, she said carefully. I like my life, I like my work. I like having control over my time and my future, but I'd be lying if I said I never wondered what it would have been like to have someone look at me the way Emma looks at you. There was a vulnerability in that admission that surprised her. She was not someone who shared her doubts, her moments of weakness, but something about this strange, disastrous evening was stripping away her usual defenses. Marcus's expression softened. She's the only thing that kept me going after Sarah left. Some days the only reason I got out of bed was because she needed breakfast. The only reason I kept working was because she needed clothes and school supplies and a roof over her head. I spent a year just surviving, going through the motions, and then one day she brought home a drawing from school. It was a picture of us, stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. She had written, "My daddy is my hero," at the top. He paused, his voice thick. That was the day I realized I had to do more than survive. I had to show her that life could still be good. Victoria felt something crack inside her chest, some carefully constructed wall she had built around her heart. She looked over at Emma, who was contentedly drawing at her table, her small tongue poking out in concentration. The child glanced up, caught Victoria's eye, and gave her a little wave. Victoria waved back, a small gesture that felt strangely monumental. Your daughter is very wise, she said, turning back to Marcus. When I was 8, I was worried about my Barbie's missing shoe. Emma worries about your happiness. Marcus smiled, and it transformed his entire face. She's smarter than I am, that's for sure. She's the one who insisted I come tonight even when the babysitter can't. She said I'd never do anything for myself. Victoria raised an eyebrow. She's 8 and already giving you life advice? He laughed, a real laugh this time. I know, it's terrifying. Sometimes I look at her and wonder where she came from. She certainly didn't get her wisdom from me. The waiter returned and they ordered their meals, Marcus choosing carefully from the lower-priced options in a way that made Victoria's heart ache. When the waiter left, she made a decision. This dinner is on me, she said firmly. Marcus immediately shook his head. No. I couldn't. Victoria leaned forward. Marcus, I'm a CEO. I make more in an hour than this meal costs. You brought your daughter to a date because you didn't want to disappoint me. So let me buy you dinner. It's the least I can do. He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression must have convinced him. Okay, he said quietly, thank you. You're welcome, she replied, and realized with a start that she was actually enjoying herself. The food arrived in stages, each course a small masterpiece of culinary art that Marcus approached with the careful appreciation of someone who rarely experienced such luxury. Victoria watched him taste his soup, saw the surprise and pleasure that crossed his face, and felt something unfamiliar stirring within her. She had dined in restaurants like this hundreds of times, had become so accustomed to excellence that she barely tasted her food anymore. Through Marcus's eyes, she was remembering what it felt like to experience something special, to recognize a moment as precious rather than routine. Between courses, their conversation deepened in unexpected ways. Marcus told her about his work, about the small bakery owner who had cried when she saw the logo he designed for her, about the nonprofit that couldn't afford his usual rates, so he did the work for free. He spoke with passion about visual storytelling, about how the right image could convey emotion more powerfully than 1,000 words. Victoria found herself leaning forward, genuinely interested, asking questions that weren't just polite but curious. She told him about Sterling Dynamics, about the tech innovations her company was pioneering in sustainable energy, but also about the constant pressure, the board members who questioned every decision, the exhaustion of always having to prove herself in rooms full of men who assumed she had inherited her position rather than built it from nothing. I started the company in my garage, she said, swirling the wine in her glass. I was 26, broke, and convinced I could build a better battery system than anything on the market. Everyone told me I was crazy. My parents wanted me to go to law school. My professors said the technology wasn't viable, but I knew I was right. So I maxed out my credit cards, worked 18-hour days, and built the first prototype with my own hands. Marcus's eyes were bright with admiration. That's incredible. When did you know you'd made it? She thought about that. Honestly, not when we got our first major contract, not when we went public. I knew I'd made it when I walked into a board meeting and realized I was no longer fighting to be heard. I was the one everyone else was fighting to impress. But that took almost 10 years. Marcus shook his head slowly. I can't imagine having that kind of drive. I mean, I work hard, but I've never had that burning need to conquer the world. Victoria studied him across the table. What do you have instead? He didn't hesitate. I have Emma. I have the knowledge that every choice I make shapes who she becomes. I have Sunday mornings making pancakes and Friday nights watching movies. I have a daughter who still thinks I'm the smartest, strongest person alive, even though I'm just a guy who's figuring it out as he goes. That's not nothing, Marcus. That's everything. The words came out more intensely than Victoria intended, and Marcus looked startled. She took a breath, steadying herself. I've built a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I've been on magazine covers. I've given keynote speeches to thousands of people. And at the end of the day, I go home to an empty apartment and eat takeout in front of my laptop. You've built something I can't buy or create or acquire. Built a family. The vulnerability in her voice seemed to create a bridge between them, a connection that transcended their vastly different lives. Marcus reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. You could have that too, you know, if you wanted it. Victoria's laugh was bitter. Could I? I'm 36 years old, Marcus. I work 70 hours a week. I have trust issues that would require years of therapy to unpack. I'm not exactly stepmother material. He smiled gently. Emma doesn't need a stepmother. She has a mother, even if that mother chose not to be in her life. What Emma needs, what any kid needs, are adults who show up, adults who care. You've already done that tonight just by not walking out. Victoria felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, a sensation so foreign that she had to blink rapidly to dispel them. I almost did walk out, she admitted. When I saw you come in late with Emma, my first instinct was to make an excuse and leave. Why didn't you? He asked. Victoria glanced over at Emma's table. The little girl had finished her dinner and was now carefully arranging her crayons in a rainbow pattern, her movements precise and thoughtful. Because of what she whispered to me, Victoria said quietly. She told me about you, about how hard you try, and I realized that if I walked out, I would be just another person who let you down. You've had enough of those. Marcus's eyes widened. That's what she said? Victoria nodded, then decided it was time for honesty. She told me your heart is broken. She told me you're the best person in the whole world. She told me she wants you to be happy, and she asked me very politely not to be mean to you. The color drained from Marcus's face, and for a moment, Victoria thought he might actually get up and leave out of sheer embarrassment, but then his shoulders sagged and he let out a long, shaky breath. I'm so sorry. She shouldn't have said that. She shouldn't have put that on you. Victoria shook her head. Don't apologize. Do you know what I've heard on most of my dates since my divorce? I've heard men brag about their portfolios. I've heard them name drop celebrities they've met. I've heard them explain in excruciating detail why they're God's gift to women. What I've never heard is genuine love. Your daughter loves you so much that she was willing to risk embarrassing you to make sure I understood how special you are. That's not something to apologize for, Marcus. That's something to be proud of. Marcus rubbed his eyes and Victoria could see he was fighting back emotion. She's all I have, he said, his voice rough. If I screw up raising her, if I fail her, then everything I've been through, everything I've sacrificed, it all means nothing. You won't fail her, Victoria said with absolute certainty. You know how I know? He looked at her questioningly. Because you're terrified of failing her. Bad parents don't worry about being bad parents. The waiter appeared to clear their plates and present the dessert menu, breaking the intensity of the moment. Marcus glanced at the menu and then at his watch. It's getting late. I should probably get Emma home. It's way past her bedtime. Victoria felt a sharp pang of disappointment which surprised her. She had expected to endure this evening, not to wish it could continue. Before she could stop herself, she said, what if she came over here? Emma, I mean, she could sit with us for dessert? Marcus hesitated. Are you sure? I don't want to impose more than I already have. You're not imposing, Victoria said, and realized she meant it. I'd like to get to know her a little better. After all, she's clearly the brains of this operation. Marcus laughed and waved to Emma, who immediately brightened and bounded over to their table, clutching Miss Her Buttons and her best crayon drawing. Emma scrambled into the chair between them, her legs swinging beneath the table. Hi, Victoria. Did you like your dinner? Victoria found herself smiling, a real smile that reached her eyes. I did. Did you like yours? Emma nodded enthusiastically. The chicken fingers were really good, and the French fries were perfect. Not too crunchy, but not too soft. She said this with the seriousness of a food critic, and Victoria had to suppress a laugh. That's very important, she agreed. The perfect fry is an art form. Emma leaned forward, conspiratorial. Can I tell you a secret? Victoria leaned in as well. Of course, Emma whispered. My daddy really likes you. I can tell because his ears get red when he's nervous, and they've been red all night. Victoria's eyes flicked to Marcus, whose ears were indeed flushed pink. He covered his face with one hand. Emma, sweetheart, we talked about inside thoughts and outside thoughts. Emma giggled. But it's true, Daddy. Victoria reached over and gently tapped Emma's hand. Well, can I tell you a secret? Emma's eyes went wide with excitement. Your daddy's very nice, and I'm glad we met, even though we got off to a rocky start. Emma beamed. Does that mean you'll see him again? The directness of the question caught Victoria off guard. She looked at Marcus, whose expression was a mixture of hope and terror. I'd like that, Victoria said carefully. If your dad would like that too. Marcus met her eyes, and in that moment something passed between them, an understanding, a possibility. I would, he said softly. I really would. Emma clapped her hands together. This is the best day ever. Well, Not the best day. The best day was when we went to the zoo and saw the baby elephants. But this is probably in the top 5. She paused thoughtfully. Maybe top 3. Victoria laughed, a genuine sound of delight. Top 3 is pretty impressive. I'll take it. They ordered dessert. A chocolate lava cake that Emma insisted they all share, passing one fork around and taking turns. It was intimate and silly and completely unlike any date Victoria had ever been on. Emma entertained them with stories from school about her best friend Lily, who could burp the alphabet, about her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who had a coffee mug that said, "I teach." What's your superpower? About the class hamster that had escaped and been found 3 days later sleeping in someone's backpack. Victoria found herself genuinely engaged, asking questions, laughing at Emma's animated retelling. She caught Marcus watching her at one point, his expression soft and wondering, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks. "What?" she asked. He shook his head. "Nothing. It's just, you're really good with her." "That surprises you?" Victoria asked. He nodded. "A little. You said you didn't want kids." Victoria looked at Emma, who was using her finger to collect the last smears of chocolate from the plate. "I didn't want the life that comes with kids," she clarified. "The minivans and the PTA meetings and the giving up of everything I worked for. But this, talking to an interesting small person who sees the world differently, this I like." Emma looked up at her, chocolate on her chin. "Victoria, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you think my daddy is handsome?" "Emma." Marcus groaned, but Victoria held up a hand. "It's okay." She looked at Emma seriously. "Yes, I do. I think your daddy's handsome. But more importantly, I think he's kind and smart and very brave for showing up tonight even though he was nervous." Emma nodded sagely. "That's what I think too. Except I also think he's funny. He does silly voices when he reads my bedtime stories." Victoria smiled at Marcus. "Does he now?" "Oh, yes." Emma continued. "He does a really good dragon voice, and his princess voice is so high it makes me laugh." Marcus had his head in his hands now, but he was laughing. "You're killing me, kiddo." Emma patted his arm comfortingly. "It's okay, Daddy. Victoria likes you anyway, I can tell." And with that proclamation, delivered with the absolute confidence of an 8-year-old, the evening reached a natural conclusion that felt less like an ending and more like a beginning. The night air was cool and crisp when they finally left the restaurant. Emma nestled sleepily against Marcus's shoulder, Mrs. Buttons dangling from her relaxed grip. It was nearly 10 o'clock, well past bedtime, and the little girl's eyes were already half closed despite her valiant efforts to stay awake. Victoria stood on the sidewalk with them, suddenly unsure of how to end the evening. In her previous dating life, this would be the moment for an awkward goodbye, a promise to call that may or may not be kept, a polite kiss on the cheek that meant nothing. But this felt different. This felt important. Marcus shifted Emma's weight slightly, trying not to wake her. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything. For not walking out, for giving us a chance, for the dinner, for all of it." Victoria found herself reaching out to brush a strand of hair from Emma's sleeping face. The gesture so natural she didn't even think about it until it was done. "Thank you for being late," she said with a small smile. "If you'd been on time, this would have been a completely different evening, probably a much more boring one." Marcus laughed softly. "I'll have to remember that. Show up late and disheveled with a child in pajamas. It's clearly my secret weapon." Victoria's smile widened. "It's certainly memorable." She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "Can I give you my number? The real one, not the one you'd get through Rebecca. I'd like to see you again. When you don't have Emma, I mean, we could do something normal. Maybe something that doesn't involve me watching you sprint through Manhattan." Marcus fumbled for his own phone with his free hand, nearly dropping it in the process. "Yes, absolutely. I would really like that." They exchanged numbers, their fingers brushing briefly as Marcus took her phone to enter his contact information. The small touch sent a surprising jolt through Victoria's system, and she realized with a start that she hadn't felt genuine attraction to someone in years. Her marriage had been passion that burned itself out. Her subsequent dates had been clinical evaluations of compatibility. This was something else entirely. This was the nervous flutter of possibility, the terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, something good could come from something that had started so absurdly. A taxi pulled up to the curb, summoned by the restaurant's doorman, and Marcus carefully maneuvered Emma toward it. Victoria found herself following, not ready to say goodbye. As Marcus settled Emma into the back seat, buckling her in with practiced efficiency, Victoria leaned down to look at the sleeping child. "Sweet dreams, Emma," she whispered. "Thank you for sharing your daddy with me tonight." Emma stirred slightly, her eyes opening just a crack. "You're pretty," she mumbled sleepily. "Daddy thinks so too," he told Miss Rebecca. Then her eyes closed again and she was gone back to sleep, leaving Victoria staring at Marcus with raised eyebrows. Marcus's face had gone completely red, visible even in the dim streetlight. I may have mentioned to Rebecca that you looked nice in your profile picture." Victoria's laugh was delighted. "Just nice?" Marcus groaned. "Okay, I may have used the word stunning, and possibly said something about how you had kind eyes. Rebecca will never let me live this down." Victoria leaned against the taxi door, feeling lighter than she had in months. "I think stunning is a perfectly acceptable assessment. For the record, I told my assistant Jennifer that you looked genuine in your photo." "That's a compliment, by the way. Genuine is rare in my world." Marcus's expression softened. "In my world, too. Most people see the single dad situation and run for the hills. Or they fetishize it like I'm some kind of noble widower in a romance novel. I'm just a guy who loves his kid and is doing his best, and that's exactly what makes you special," Victoria said. She straightened up, knowing if she didn't leave now, she might not leave at all. Text me when you get home. Let me know you both made it safely. Marcus nodded, his eyes bright. I will. Good night, Victoria. Good night, Marcus. She stepped back and watched as the taxi pulled away from the curb, carrying Marcus and his sleeping daughter back to their life in whatever modest neighborhood they called home. She stood there for a long moment, watching the red taillights disappear into the Manhattan traffic, feeling the strangest sensation of loss, as if something precious had just been taken from her, even though she had willingly let it go. Victoria's driver pulled up in her sleek black car and she slid into the back seat, immediately checking her phone. There were 17 unread emails, 4 missed calls from her executive team, and a text from her assistant asking about the quarterly review meeting scheduled for Monday. Her real life was waiting for her, demanding her attention, pulling her back into the world of corporate strategy and competitive markets. But for the entire drive back to her penthouse apartment, she ignored all of it. Instead, she found herself replaying the evening in her mind, examining it from every angle like a complex business problem. What had just happened? She had gone to dinner expecting nothing and had come away feeling something she couldn't quite name. Interest, certainly. Attraction, definitely, but there was more. There was a sense of connection, of being seen by someone who had no agenda, no desire to use her or impress her or extract something from her. Marcus had looked at her like she was a person, not a position. Emma had looked at her like she might be someone worth knowing, not someone to fear or worship. Her apartment was exactly as she had left it that morning, pristine and silent and cold. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of the city, a vista that had once filled her with pride and now just made her feel small. She poured herself a glass of water and stood at the window, looking down at the lights below, thinking about Marcus and Emma and their tax, probably pulling up to a modest building with peeling paint and broken elevator. She thought about Emma being carried upstairs, still clutching Mamar. Buttons, being tucked into a bed that probably wasn't in a room of her own because single dads working freelance couldn't afford 2-bedroom apartments and new. She thought about Marcus checking his bank account and wincing at the taxi fare, money he wouldn't have had to spend if his babysitter hadn't gotten hurt. The disparity between their lives was staggering, and Victoria knew that if she pursued this, that disparity would become an obstacle. How could it not? She lived in a world of private jets and exclusive clubs. He lived in a world of freelance income and babysitter emergencies. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Home safe. Emma didn't even wake up when I carried her upstairs. Thank you again for tonight. You turned a disaster into something I'll never forget. Victoria smiled at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Before she could second-guess herself, she typed back, "The pleasure was mine. Lunch this week? No pajamas required, though I did think Emma's style was very fashion-forward." His response came quickly, and she could almost hear the laugh in it. "Wednesday? I can do any time. I'll wear my good shirt, the one without paint stains." Victoria found herself grinning like a teenager. "Wednesday it is? Noon? I know a place. It's less formal than tonight. They serve excellent sandwiches, and nobody will judge your shirt. It's a date," Marcus replied. Then, after a pause, another message. "I'm really glad the babysitter fell. Is that terrible to say?" Victoria's heart squeezed. "Not terrible at all. I'm glad you were late. Good night, Marcus." "Good night, Victoria." She set her phone down and realized she was still smiling. The emails could wait. The calls could wait. For tonight, she was just a woman who had been on a surprisingly wonderful date, and that was enough. She went to bed without opening her laptop, without checking her stocks, without reviewing her schedule for the next day. She went to bed thinking about a man with kind eyes and a daughter with unlimited courage, and she slept better than she had in months. The next morning, Victoria woke to find 17 text messages from Rebecca, who had apparently been contacted by Marcus with a full report of the evening. The messages ranged from "I told you so" to "When is the wedding" to the more measured "I'm so happy for you both. This could be really good." Victoria responded simply, "It was one date. Let's not plan the wedding yet." But even as she typed it, she felt a flutter of something that might have been hope. She went about her Sunday routine, hitting the gym, reviewing proposals, answering emails, but her mind kept drifting back to the restaurant, to Emma's sleeping face in the taxi, to Marcus's grateful smile. On Monday morning, Victoria walked into her office to find her assistant Jennifer waiting with coffee and a knowing smile. "So," Jennifer said, settling into the chair across from Victoria's desk, "how was the date?" Victoria took a sip of her coffee, buying time. "It was good. Interesting. Very different from what I expect." Jennifer leaned forward. "Different good or different bad?" "Different good," Victoria admitted. "He brought his daughter. There was an emergency with childcare. I almost walked out, but I didn't, and it ended up being the best date I've had in years." Jennifer's eyes widened. "He brought his kid to a first date? That's either incredibly bold or incredibly stupid." "Or incredibly desperate," Victoria says. "Babysitter got hurt last minute. He didn't have my number to cancel. He ran across half of Manhattan with his daughter in her pajamas because he didn't want to stand me up." Jennifer sat back, processing this. "That's actually kind of romantic, in a chaotic, unconventional way." Victoria nodded. "That's exactly what it was. His daughter is 8, smart as a whip. She whispered to me that her dad's heart is broken, but he's the best person in the world. How do you walk away from that?" Jennifer smiled softly. "You don't. So when are you seeing him again?" "Wednesday," Victoria said. "Lunch, somewhere casual. No children this time, just the two of us." She paused. "Jenny, do you think this is crazy? He's a freelance designer. I'm a CEO. We live in completely different worlds." Jennifer considered this. Can I be honest? Victoria nodded. Some of the most miserable people I know are rich. Some of the happiest people I know are just getting by. Money doesn't buy compatibility, boss. Connection does. If you connect with this guy, if he makes you feel something real, then who cares if he doesn't summer in the Hamptons? Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes, an alarming frequency of emotion that was becoming a pattern. When did you get so wise? Jennifer grinned. I've always been wise. You've just been too busy running an empire to notice. Now go make your millions so you can afford to buy this guy a nice lunch on Wednesday. Victoria laughed and threw a pen at her assistant, who dodged it easily and left the office with a wave. The week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Victoria threw herself into work negotiating a major contract with a European distributor, mediating a dispute between two vice presidents, presenting the quarterly results to the board. She was brilliant and focused and effective, but underneath it all, she was counting down the hours until Wednesday. Marcus texted her periodically, nothing heavy, just small observations about his day. Emma demanded I tell you that she's decided you're her favorite of all my dates. For context, you're the only date I've had in 4 years, so the competition wasn't exactly fierce. Victoria responded with, tell Emma I'm honored. Also tell her I'm willing to bribe her with ice cream to maintain this position. His reply made her laugh out loud in the middle of a meeting. She says ice cream is an acceptable currency and she looks forward to negotiating terms. Wednesday morning arrived with a sky so blue it looked painted. Victoria changed her outfit 3 times, eventually settling on dark jeans and a cashmere sweater. Casual but still polished. She left her hair down, added minimal makeup, and stared at herself in the mirror. She looked like a woman about to go on a date with someone she actually liked, and that realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, still on forenoon? The sandwich place on Lexington? Victoria smiled. Absolutely. See you soon. She took a deep breath, grabbed her purse, and walked out of her apartment, leaving behind the CEO and becoming simply Victoria, a woman about to see if lightning could possibly strike twice. Marcus arrived at the sandwich shop 15 minutes early, which gave him plenty of time to panic. He had chosen a small table by the window, ordered a water he was too nervous to drink, and spent the intervening minutes second-guessing everything about himself. Was his shirt too casual? It was his nicest button-down, a soft blue that Emma said made him look like a prince. But compared to the sleek professionals flowing past on the sidewalk, he felt hopelessly ordinary. Should he have brought flowers? Was that too much for a second date? Was this even technically a second date, or was the disaster at La Maison Bleue some kind of zeroth date that didn't count? His mind was a carnival of anxiety, and he was just considering making a run for the subway when he saw her. Victoria walked through the door with the kind of confidence that turned heads without her even trying. She was dressed down compared to Friday night in dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater that looked impossibly soft, but she still carried herself like someone who owned the world. Her hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, and when her eyes found his across the crowded shop, her face lit up with a smile that made his heart stutter. He stood awkwardly, nearly knocking over his water glass, and she crossed to him with an easy grace. Hi, she said, and somehow that one simple word felt weighted with meaning. Hi yourself, he managed, and they stood there for a moment, both suddenly shy, before she laughed and leaned in to kiss his cheek. He caught the scent of her perfume, something subtle and expensive, and felt his brain short-circuit completely. They ordered at the counter, Victoria insisting on paying despite his protests, and carried their sandwiches back to the table. For a few minutes they made small talk about their mornings, safe topics that skirted around anything too heavy. Victoria told him about a particularly tedious board meeting. Marcus told her about Emma's insistence that morning that he promised to report back everything Victoria said and did, like a spy on a reconnaissance mission. She takes her role as matchmaker very seriously, he said with a rueful smile. I tried to explain that we're just getting to know each other, but she's already planning our wedding. Apparently it's going to be at the zoo because, quote, Victoria needs to see the baby elephants. Victoria laughed, a real unguarded sound. I do love elephants. Tell Emma I approve of her venue choice. She paused, her expression becoming more serious. How is it being away from her? During the day, I mean. Do you worry? Marcus appreciated the question, the genuine interest behind it. All the time, he admitted. Even when she's at school and I know she's safe, there's this part of my brain that's always running calculation. Is she happy? Is she eating lunch or just trading her apple slices for cookies? Is she making friends or sitting alone? It's exhausting, caring this much about another person. Victoria nodded slowly. I can't imagine it. The weight of being responsible for another life. My company employs 300 people and I worry about their jobs, their futures, but that's different. That's abstract. What you do is so immediate, so personal. She took a bite of her sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. Do you ever resent it? The responsibility? Marcus considered the question honestly. Sometimes, he said. When I'm at 3 in the morning because Emma had a nightmare and I have a deadline looming and I'm so tired I could cry. Or when I see my old college friends posting pictures from their trips to Europe and I'm clipping coupons for cereal. In those moments, yeah, I think about how much easier my life would be if it was just me. He met Victoria's eyes. But then Emma will do something like bring me a dandelion she picked because it reminded her of sunshine. Or she'd fall asleep holding my hand because she feels safest with me and I realize I wouldn't trade any of it. Not for all the freedom or money or ease in the world. Being her dad is the only thing I've ever done that really matters. Victoria's eyes were bright and she reached across the table to touch his hand. You're going to make me cry in the middle of a sandwich shop, she said soft. I'm serious. That's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever said to me. Marcus felt his face heat. Sorry, I know I probably talk about Emma too much, and I'm not very good at the whole dating thing. Don't apologize, Victoria said firmly. I like that you talk about her. It's refreshing. Most of the men I've dated have been so focused on impressing me that they barely talk about anything real. You're just yourself. That's rare. They finished their sandwiches and ordered coffee, neither of them ready for the meal to end. The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Shared interests they were discovering. They both loved old movies, the black and white classics that modern audiences had mostly forgotten. Victoria confessed to a secret addiction to terrible reality television, the kind she would never admit to watching in professional settings. Marcus told her about his failed attempt to learn guitar, how he had bought a used instrument with grand visions of serenading Emma with lullabies, and had discovered he was spectacularly tone deaf. They laughed easily, the initial nervousness dissolving into something comfortable and warm. Victoria found herself watching the way Marcus's hands moved when he talked, expressive and graceful. Marcus found himself memorizing the way Victoria's nose crinkled when she laughed, like she was surprised by her own amusement. An hour passed, then two. The lunch crowd thinned, replaced by the afternoon stragglers working on laptops and nursing cold coffee. Victoria glanced at her phone and made a face. I need to get back to the office. Have a meeting at 3. Marcus nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. Of course. Thank you for lunch. This was really nice. They stood and walked outside together, and the afternoon sun felt warmer than it should for October. They lingered on the sidewalk, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Victoria turned to him, her expression uncertain in a way he hadn't seen before. Marcus, can I ask you something? It might be too soon, but I'd rather be direct than play games. Of course, he said, his heart rate picking up. Ask me anything. Do you want children? More children. Victoria's voice was carefully controlled, but he could hear the vulnerability underneath. I know Emma is your world, and I know you're an amazing father, but if we keep seeing each other, if this goes somewhere, I need to know if you're expecting more kids. Because I can't give you that. I don't want that. And I'd rather know now if that's a deal breaker. Marcus felt the weight of the question, understood what she was really asking. She was giving him an out, a chance to walk away before either of them got hurt. He thought about it seriously because she deserved a serious answer. Honestly, when Sarah left, I thought about having more kids someday. I thought about giving Emma a sibling, building a bigger family. But that was a fantasy, a picture in my head of what I thought I was supposed to want. He stepped closer to her. The truth is, I'm 34 and exhausted. I barely have the energy for one kid. The idea of starting over with diapers and sleepless nights sounds like a nightmare, not a dream. What I want is a partner. Someone who loves Emma and who I can love back. Someone who makes me feel like I'm more than just a dad. If that person doesn't want more kids, then honestly, that's a relief. Victoria's eyes searched his face. You mean that? You're not just saying what you think I want to hear? Marcus took her hand, lacing their fingers together in a gesture that felt bold and right. I mean it. I've had enough of people leaving because I'm not what they expected. I want to be honest with you from the start. No kids. Got it. But also no lying, no games, no pretending to be someone I'm not. Can you handle that? Victoria squeezed his hand and her smile was radiant. I can handle that. In fact, I prefer it. She leaned up and kissed him. A real kiss this time, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, Marcus felt dizzy. Your meeting, he said weakly. You're going to be late. Worth it, Victoria murmured. She pulled out her phone and quickly typed something. There, I just told my assistant to reschedule. I'm taking the afternoon off. Marcus blinked in surprise. You can do that? She grinned. I'm the CEO. I can do whatever I want. The question is, do you have time or do you need to get back to work? Marcus thought about the logo redesign waiting for him at home, the client who wanted revisions by Friday. He thought about his carefully managed schedule, his responsible choices, his disciplined life. Then he looked at Victoria, at her hopeful expression and her hand still holding his, and he made a choice that felt reckless and wonderful. I have time, he said. What did you have in mind? Victoria's smile turned mischievous. Have you ever been to the Museum of Modern Art? There's an exhibit I've been wanting to see. Rothko paintings. Big blocks of color that are supposed to make you feel emotions. Marcus laughed. That sounds very CEO of you. Cultured and sophisticated. She nudged him with her elbow. Says the graphic designer. Don't tell me you're not interested in color theory. He grinned. Okay, you got me. I'm absolutely interested. Lead the way. And so they walked together through the Manhattan afternoon. Two people from different worlds finding common ground in art museums and honest conversations. Neither of them knowing that their happiness was already being watched by eyes that wished them harm. The Museum of Modern Art was quieter on a Wednesday afternoon than Marcus had expected, filled with tourists speaking in hushed tones and art students sketching in notebooks. Victoria led him through the galleries with the ease of someone who had walked these halls many times before, but today felt different for her. She wasn't here to check a cultural box or kill time between meetings. She was here with someone who made her want to share the things she loved, to see them through fresh eyes. They found the Rothko exhibit in a dimly lit room designed to showcase the massive canvases, each one a meditation in color that seemed to pulse with inner light. Marcus stood in front of a painting that was mostly deep red with a strip of orange along the bottom. He was quiet for so long that Victoria thought maybe she had miscalculated, that maybe this was too pretentious, too boring for a real connection. Then he spoke, his voice soft. It feels like grief, doesn't it? The way the red pushes down on the orange, like something heavy sitting on your chest. Victoria moved closer to him, looking at the painting with new understanding. Yes, she whispered. That's exactly what it feels like. How did you know? Marcus shrugged slightly. Felt that weight. After Sarah left, I would lie in bed at night and feel like I couldn't breathe, like the sadness was a physical thing crushing me. This painting understands that. He turned to her. Does that sound crazy? Not even a little bit, Victoria said. She took his hand and they moved to the next painting together. This one predominantly blue with hints of green. This one feels like hope, Marcus said. Like maybe the heavy thing lifted just a little and you can see light underneath. Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes. You're better at this than I am. I usually just look at them and think they're pretty. That's because you haven't let yourself feel in a long time, Marcus said gently. You've been so busy being strong that you forgot it's okay to let art make you cry or laugh or remember things you buried. She looked at him. This man who barely knew her and yet somehow saw straight through her carefully constructed defenses. How do you do that? Do what? He asked. Make me feel safe enough to fall apart. Marcus squeezed her hand. Because I'm already in pieces myself. You don't have to pretend with me. We can be broken together. They spent an hour in that room talking about color and emotion and loss, and by the time they emerged, Victoria felt like she had been through therapy and a religious experience combined. They wandered through other exhibits discussing pieces they loved and pieces they didn't understand, and somewhere in the middle of a sculpture garden, Marcus pulled her close and kissed her again. This time it wasn't gentle. This time it was urgent, hungry, full of all the loneliness they had both been carrying. When they broke apart, Victoria was breathing hard. We should probably get out of here before we scandalize the art patrons, she said shakily. Marcus grinned. Probably a good idea. Where to next? She checked her phone and made a face. I actually do need to stop by the office for an hour. There's a contract I need to sign personally. But after that, are you free for dinner? Marcus thought about Emma, who was at an after-school program until 5:30. He would need to pick her up, but Rebecca had mentioned she could watch her for the evening if needed. Let me make a call, he said. 5 minutes later, plans were set. Rebecca, who had sounded far too delighted on the phone, had agreed to pick Emma up and keep her overnight. You deserve this, she had said. Go have fun. Be young and stupid for once. Marcus had laughed and promised to tell her everything later, though he suspected Emma would provide a full report regardless. They took a taxi to Sterling Dynamics headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in Midtown. Marcus felt out of place the moment they walked into the lobby with its marble floors and modern art installations. Men and women in expensive suits hurried past with purposeful expressions, and he was acutely aware of his casual button-down and jeans. Victoria seemed to sense his discomfort. You okay? She asked quietly. Just feeling a little underdressed, he admitted. She smiled. You look perfect. Come on. I'll show you my office. This should only take 20 minutes. They rode the elevator to the 32nd floor, and Victoria led him down a hallway lined with glass-walled conference rooms. People looked up as they passed, their expressions registering surprise at seeing their CEO with a man who was clearly not from their corporate world. Victoria ignored the stares with practiced ease, but Marcus felt them like pinpricks. They reached a corner office with Victoria's name on the door, and she ushered him inside. Her office was impressive, all clean lines and minimalist furniture with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a spectacular view of the city. Make yourself comfortable, she said, gesturing to a leather sofa. I'll be as quick as I can. She disappeared through a side door to confer with her assistant, and Marcus was left alone in a space that felt like a museum exhibit titled The CEO's Natural Habitat. He walked to the windows and looked out at the sprawling city below, trying to imagine what it must be like to command this kind of power, to make decisions that affected hundreds of lives. It was so far removed from his world of freelance work and client emails that it might as well have been a different planet. He was still staring out the window when the office door opened behind him. He turned, expecting Victoria, but instead found a man in an impeccable charcoal suit. The man was probably in his early 40s, with sharp features and calculating eyes that immediately assessed Marcus and found him wanting. Can I help you? The man asked, his tone making it clear that Marcus's presence was both unexpected and unwelcome. I'm waiting for Victoria, Marcus said, trying to match the man's professional tone. We have plans. The man's eyebrows rose slightly. Plans? How interesting. I'm David Hartley, Chief Financial Officer, and you are? Marcus Chun, he said, extending his hand. The handshake was brief and cold. David's expression had shifted into something Marcus couldn't quite read, though it made him profoundly uncomfortable. Marcus Chun, David repeated, as if tasting the name. The graphic designer. Yes, word travels fast in our building. You're the one, Rebecca said, Victoria. The blind date that apparently went surprisingly well. There was something in David's tone that set off alarm bells in Marcus's head. He had heard that particular blend of condescension and false friendliness before, usually right before someone tried to sell him something he didn't want. Yes, he said carefully. It's me. David walked farther into the office, his movements casual but somehow territorial. Can I give you some advice, Marcus, man to man? Marcus wanted to say no, wanted to tell this stranger that his advice was neither requested nor welcome, but years of avoiding conflict made him nod instead. Of course. David leaned against Victoria's desk, folding his arms. Victoria Sterling is an extraordinary woman. Brilliant, ambitious, driven. She's built this company into something remarkable, but she's also under an enormous amount of pressure. The board, the investors, the competition, they're all watching her every move, looking for any sign of weakness. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. A relationship with someone outside her world, someone who doesn't understand the demands of her position, that could be seen as a distraction, a liability even. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, hot and sharp. Are you saying I'm not good enough for her? David held up his hands in a gesture of false innocence. I'm not saying anything of the sort. I'm simply pointing out that Victoria's personal life becomes public very quickly in our circles. There are people who would use a relationship like yours as ammunition against her. Questions about her judgment, her priorities, her focus. I'm sure you wouldn't want to be the reason she loses credibility with the board. Marcus stared at this man, at his expensive suit and his practiced manipulation, and he saw him clearly. David Hartley was not offering friendly advice. He was issuing a warning. Maybe even a threat. Before Marcus could respond, Victoria's voice cut through the tension like a knife. David, what are you doing in my office? She stood in the doorway, her assistant Jennifer hovering nervously behind her. Victoria's expression was ice, and Marcus suddenly understood how she commanded boardrooms and intimidated competitors. This was not the woman who had laughed over sandwiches or cried at Rothko paintings. This was the CEO. And she was formidable. David straightened up, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Just introducing myself to your friend, making sure he was comfortable while he waited. Victoria's gaze flicked to Marcus, a silent question in her eyes. Are you okay? He nodded, though his heart was still pounding. David walked toward the door, pausing next to Victoria. I'll have those revised projections on your desk by tomorrow morning, he said smoothly. Have a lovely evening. He left, and the office suddenly felt less oppressive. Victoria closed the door behind him and turned to Marcus. What did he say to you? Marcus hesitated. He basically told me I'm not good enough for you and that I'm gonna ruin your career. Victoria's jaw tight. That son of a bitch. She crossed to Marcus and took both his hands. Listen to me very carefully. David Hartley is a talented CFO and a miserable human being. He's been angling for a promotion to coup for 2 years, and I keep blocking it because he lacks basic empathy. He sees my personal life as a weakness he can exploit. Please don't let him get in your head. Marcus wanted to believe her, but David's words had planted seeds of doubt. Victoria, he's not completely wrong. Look at this office. Look at your life. I'm a freelance designer who lives in a one-bedroom apartment with my daughter. Our worlds are completely different. Victoria cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. Our circumstances are different. Our worlds are not. You care about people. I care about people. You want to build something meaningful. I want to build something meaningful. You make me laugh and think and feel. That's what matters, not offices or apartments or what David Hartley thinks. Marcus felt the doubt receding, pushed back by the certainty in her voice. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. She kissed him softly. Now let me sign this damn contract so we can get out of here and have dinner somewhere far away from men in expensive suits. 20 minutes later, they were in a small Italian restaurant in the West Village. A place with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles and no pretense whatsoever. Victoria had chosen it deliberately, a statement that she could exist in his world as his eye as he felt lost in hers. They ordered pasta and wine, and slowly the tension from the encounter with David faded. But Marcus couldn't quite shake the feeling that they had just been given a preview of the obstacles that lay ahead. And he wondered if love, no matter how genuine, could really bridge the gap between two such different lives. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus and Victoria fell into a rhythm that felt both natural and impossible. They saw each other whenever their schedules allowed, which was more often than either had expected. Victoria discovered that she could, in fact, leave work at reasonable hours if she simply decided to do it. Marcus discovered that Emma was not just accepting of Victoria's presence in their lives, but was actively championing it, asking every morning if Miss Victoria would be coming over that day. Their dates were a study in contrasts. Sometimes Victoria would arrange something elaborate, like tickets to a Broadway show or reservations at a restaurant that required booking months in advance. Other times, Marcus would plan something simple, like a walk through Central Park or making dinner together in his tiny kitchen while Emma did homework at the table. Victoria found she enjoyed the simple evenings more, the ones where she could kick off her heels and help Emma with her math problems while Marcus cooked pasta with ingredients that cost less than her usual lunch. It was during one of these evenings, about a month after their first date, that something shifted fundamentally. Victoria had arrived at Marcus's apartment straight from work, still in her tailored suit and carrying her briefcase. Emma had answered the door with her characteristic enthusiasm, grabbing Victoria's hand and pulling her inside. Miss Victoria, you have to see what I made at school today. It's a drawing of my family, and I put you in it. Victoria had felt her heart stutter. Emma's drawing showed 4 stick figures holding hands. One was labeled Daddy, one was Emma, one was Myrrh, buttons of the stuffed rabbit, and one slightly taller than the others with long dark hair was labeled Miss Victoria. Above them, Emma had drawn a rainbow and written in careful block letters, "My family is love." Victoria had stared at that drawing, unable to speak, while Emma explained that her teacher said families come in all different shapes and that love is what makes them real. Marcus had appeared from the kitchen, dish towel over his shoulder, and had frozen when he saw what Victoria was holding. "Emma, sweetie, you can't just assume," he started, but Victoria cut him off. "Can I keep this?" she asked Emma, her voice thick. "It's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever made for me." Emma had nodded vigorously. "Of course. I made it for you." Victoria had carefully rolled up the drawing and placed it in her briefcase. And later that night, after Emma was asleep, she and Marcus had sat on his threadbare couch and talked about what it meant. "I don't want to rush things," Marcus said quietly, "but Emma's getting attached to you. If this isn't serious, if you're not sure about us, I need to know now, before she gets hurt." Victoria had taken his hand. "I'm sure," she said. "I'm more sure about this than I've been about anything in years. I don't know how we make it work with our different lives, but I want to try. I want to be in that drawing." They had sealed the promise with a kiss that turned into something deeper, and Victoria had stayed the night for the first time, sleeping in Marcus's narrow bed with his arms around her, feeling safer than she ever had in her king-sized bed in her penthouse. But safety, as it turned out, was an illusion. David Hartley had not forgotten about Marcus Chun, and he had been busy. He had started subtly at first, dropping comments in board meetings about Victoria's decreased focus, about how her mind seemed to be elsewhere during strategic discussions. He mentioned casually that she had been leaving early several times a week, that she had canceled important meetings. The board members, already prone to questioning a female CEO's commitment, had taken note. David had then escalated, hiring a private investigator to document Victoria's relationship with Marcus. It wasn't illegal, he told himself. It was due diligence, protecting the company's interests. The investigator's report had been thorough. Marcus Chun, 34, freelance graphic designer, single father, annual income approximately $60,000. No criminal record, no red flags, but also no pedigree, no connections, no value to Sterling Dynamics beyond his apparent hold on their CEO's attention. The report included photos of Victoria leaving Marcus's modest apartment building early in the morning, of her laughing with him and Emma in Central Park, of her looking decidedly un-CEO, like in jeans and a ponytail. David had compiled everything into a folder he labeled Victoria Sterling Personal Concerns and had scheduled a private meeting with Walter Kemp, the head of Sterling Dynamics Board of Directors. Walter Kemp was 72 years old, wealthy beyond measure, deeply traditional in his views about business and life. He had been skeptical about Victoria from the beginning, had voted against her appointment as CEO 5 years ago, and had only grudgingly admitted she had exceeded expectations. But he was always watching for signs of weakness, for proof that his initial concerns had been valid. David sat across from Walter in his office, a space that smelled of cigar smoke and old money, and presented his case with the precision of a prosecutor. "I'm bringing this to you out of concern for the company," David began, sliding the folder across the desk. "Victoria has been involved in a relationship that I believe is affecting her judgment and potentially her ability to lead." Walter opened the folder and flipped through the photos and documents, his expression dark. "Who is this man?" "A freelancer. No significant assets, no professional reputation to speak of. He has a child from a previous relationship." David paused for effect. "Victoria has been spending considerable time with them. She's been leaving work early, canceling meetings, appearing distracted. I've spoken to several department heads who have expressed concern." Walter studied a photo of Victoria pushing Emma on a swing, both of them laughing. "She looks happy," he said, but his tone suggested that happiness was beside the point. "She's the CEO of a major corporation," David said. "Happiness is a luxury she can't afford if it comes at the expense of her responsibilities. The board expects leadership, focus, dedication, not someone playing house with a single father and his child." Walter closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. "What do you propose?" David had been waiting for this question. "I think we need to have a conversation with Victoria. Make it clear that her personal life is becoming a liability. Give her a choice, essentially. The company or the relationship." Walter considered this. "That's a dangerous line to walk. If she fights back, claims discrimination, it could get messy." "Then we frame it as a performance issue," David said smoothly. "We document the missed meetings, the early departures. We present it as a pattern of decreased commitment. If she can't balance her personal life with her professional responsibilities, perhaps she's not the right person to lead Sterling Dynamics into its next phase of growth." Walter nodded slowly. "Set up a board meeting for next week, executive session. We'll address this properly." David left that meeting feeling triumphant, already imagining the coup position that would surely be his once Victoria was out of the way. He had positioned himself perfectly as the voice of reason, the one who had spotted the problem and brought it to light. What he hadn't counted on was Jennifer, Victoria's assistant, who had overheard parts of his conversation with Walter through the not-quite-closed office door. Jennifer had been with Victoria for 3 years, had seen her work herself to exhaustion, had watched her sacrifice everything for the company. And she had seen over the past month Victoria transformed into someone who actually smiled, who laughed at her desk, who seemed to remember that there was more to life than quarterly earnings reports. Jennifer knew that what was coming would devastate Victoria, and she also knew that forewarned was forearmed. That evening, after everyone had left the office, Jennifer called Victoria at home. "I need to tell you something," she said without preamble, "and you're not going to like it." Victoria listened as Jennifer explained everything she had overheard, the private investigator, the folder of photos, the board meeting being planned. With each revelation, Victoria felt her blood run colder. "This isn't about my performance," she said when Jennifer finished. "This is David making his move. He wants my my job. Yes, Jennifer agreed, and he's using Marcus to get it. Victoria ended the call and sat in her silent apartment staring at Emma's drawing that she had framed and hung on her bedroom wall. She had known intellectually that her relationship with Marcus would draw attention, possibly criticism, but she had underestimated how quickly that criticism would become weaponized. She picked up her phone and called Marcus. "I need to see you," she said when he answered. "Tonight, it's important." The fear in her voice brought him immediately to attention. "I'll get someone to watch Emma. Where should I meet you?" "Your place," she said. "I'm coming to you." An hour later, she was sitting on his couch while he made tea with shaking hands, and she told him everything. The investigation, the photos, the board meeting, the ultimatum that was surely coming. When she finished, Marcus set down his mug carefully, as if afraid he might shatter it. "So they're gonna make you choose. The company or me?" Victoria's throat was tight. "That's what David wants, yes. They'll frame it as a performance issue, but really they're saying I can't have both a career and a relationship." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Then maybe you shouldn't." Her head snapped up. "What?" His eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Victoria, you've worked your entire life to build Sterling Dynamics. You've sacrificed everything for that company. I can't be the reason you lose it." "I won't be." "What are you saying?" she asked, even though she already knew, even though her heart was already breaking. "I'm saying maybe David is right. Maybe our worlds are too different. Maybe I'm a distraction you can't afford." He stood up, turning away from her. "Maybe it's better if we end this now, before it costs you everything you've worked for." Victoria stood as well, anger replacing the fear. "Don't you dare make this decision for me. Don't you dare tell me what I can afford to lose." Marcus turned back to her and she saw the pain written across his face. "I'm trying to protect you." "I don't need protection," she said fiercely. "I need you to fight for us. I need you to believe that we're worth fighting for." "Are we?" he asked quietly, "because I'm starting to think David was right that first day. I'm not good enough for your world. I'm just a complication." Victoria crossed to him and grabbed his face in both hands, forcing him to look at her. "You're the best thing that's happened to me in 10 years. You and Emma, you've given me a reason to leave the office. You've reminded me that I'm human, not just a CEO. If they make me choose, I choose you." Marcus's eyes widened. "You can't mean that. Your company, your life's work, I do mean it," she said. "And tomorrow, I'm gonna walk into that board meeting, and I'm gonna make them understand that my personal life is none of their business. I'm gonna fight for us, Marcus. The question is, will you?" He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, I'll fight. I'm sorry I doubted us." She held him tight, and they stood there in his small living room. Two people from different worlds preparing for the battle that would determine if love could really conquer all, or if the weight of their differences would crush them before they ever had a chance. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday at 2 in the afternoon, which gave Victoria 3 days to prepare. She spent those days doing what she did best, gathering data, building her case, and preparing for war. She pulled every metric that demonstrated her effectiveness as CEO. Revenue had increased 43% under her leadership. Employee satisfaction scores were at an all-time high. The company's stock price had more than doubled. She had successfully navigated 2 major acquisitions and launched 3 groundbreaking products. Her record was impeccable, and she intended to make the board see that her personal life had not diminished her professional excellence in any measurable way. But she also knew that facts and figures would only get her so far. This was not really about performance. This was about power, about David's ambition, and about a board of old men who fundamentally believed that a woman could not have both a demanding career and a fulfilling personal life. Jennifer became her war room partner, staying late every night to help compile documents and rehearse potential questions. "You need to be prepared for them to get personal," Jennifer warned on Wednesday evening. "They're going to ask about Marcus directly. They're going to make you defend your choice." "I know," Victoria said, reviewing a spreadsheet of quarterly earning, "and I will defend it, but I won't apologize for it." Jennifer looked at her with something like awe. "You've changed, you know. A few months ago, you would have already ended the relationship to avoid this fight. You would have calculated that the company was more important than any man." Victoria thought about Emma's drawing, about Marcus's arms around her at night, about the way she had laughed more in the past month than in the past 5 years combined. "I would have," she admitted, "because I thought the company was all I had. But now I know better. Now I know what I'd be sacrificing, and I refuse to do it, not without a fight." On Thursday evening, Marcus brought Emma to Victoria's apartment for dinner. It had been Emma's idea, insisting that Miss Victoria needed them, even though Marcus had tried to explain that Victoria was busy preparing for an important meeting. But Victoria had welcomed them gratefully, needing the reminder of what she was fighting for. Emma had brought her own contribution to the battle, a good luck card she had made at school. The front showed a stick figure with long dark hair wearing a cape and a crown, clearly meant to be Victoria. Inside, in Emma's careful handwriting, it read, "You are the bravest person I know. You can do anything. Love, Emma. P.S. Daddy loves you too, but he's too shy to say it." Victoria had read that postscript and looked up at Marcus, who had turned bright red. "Emma, sweetie, we talked about inside thoughts," he started, but Victoria cut him off by pulling him into a kiss. When they broke apart, she whispered against his lips, "Tell me anyway, I want to hear you say it." Marcus cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Victoria Sterling. I love how brilliant you are, how fierce, how you pretend to be invincible, but you're really just as scared as the rest of us. I love the way you look at Emma like she's something precious. I love that you chose us over the easy path. And tomorrow when you walk into that board meeting, I want you to remember remember that no matter what happened, you have us. We're your family now. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face, and for once she didn't try to hide them. Love you too, she said. Both of you. You've given me something I didn't even know I was missing. They spent the evening together, eating takeout pizza on Victoria's expensive white couch and not caring about the crumbs. Emma fell asleep between them halfway through a Disney movie, and Marcus carried her to Victoria's guest bedroom, tucking her in with misser buttons. When he returned to the living room, Victoria was standing at her floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the city lights. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. Talk to me, he said softly. What are you thinking? She leaned back against him. I'm thinking about what I'll say tomorrow. I've prepared all the data, all the logical arguments, but I keep coming back to something simpler. I want to tell them that I'm 43 years old and I've spent every moment since I was 26 building that company. I've missed birthdays and holidays and vacations. I've sacrificed friendships and relationships, given them everything they asked for and more. And now when I've finally found something that makes me happy, they want to take it away because they think I can't be trusted to manage my own life. How dare they? Marcus turned her to face him. Then say that. Say exactly that. Make them see you as human, not just as a CEO. Make them understand what they're asking you to give up. Victoria nodded, drawing strength from his certainty. She had spent her entire career trying to be perfect, trying to prove she belonged in rooms full of men who assumed she didn't. Maybe it was time to stop trying to be what they expected and start being who she actually was. That night, after Marcus had left with a sleeping Emma in his arms, Victoria lay in her bed and rehearsed what she would say. She knew David would paint her as distracted, as unprofessional, as letting her emotions cloud her judgment. She needed to be ready to counter every accusation with facts, but also with the truth. The truth was that loving Marcus and Emma had made her a better leader, not a worse one. She had learned to delegate more effectively, to trust her team, to recognize that working 18-hour days was not the same as being productive. She discovered that happiness was not a weakness but a strength, that people who had something to live for fought harder than people who had nothing to lose. She would make them see that, or she would walk away from Sterling Dynamics with her head held high, knowing she had chosen love over fear. Friday morning dawned gray and cold, the kind of weather that matched Victoria's mood. She dressed carefully in her most powerful suit, charcoal gray with sharp lines that made her look like she could cut through steel. She wore her highest heels, the ones that made her tower over most men. She pulled her hair back in a severe bun and put on minimal makeup, wanting to look like the professional they respected, not the woman they feared. Jennifer met her at the office with coffee and a tight hug. Got this, she whispered. Remember, you're not just fighting for yourself, fighting for every woman who's been told she can't have both. Victoria nodded, drawing strength from her assistant's faith. The board meeting was in the large conference room on the 35th floor, a space designed to intimidate with its massive table and uncomfortable chairs. Victoria arrived 5 minutes early, carrying her briefcase full of data and her heart full of resolve. The board members were already there, 9 men in expensive suits, their faces ranging from sympathetic to hostile. David sat to one side, trying to look concerned rather than triumphant, but Victoria could see the gleam in his eyes. Walter Kemp called the meeting to order with the gravity of a judge pronouncing sentence. Victoria, thank you for joining us. We have some concerns we need to address regarding your recent performance and decision-making. Victoria met his gaze steadily. I'm happy to address any concerns you have about my performance. The numbers speak for themselves. Sterling Dynamics has never been stronger. Walter glanced at David, who cleared his throat. The issue isn't just about numbers, Victoria. It's about focus, commitment, and judgment. We've noticed a pattern of behavior that suggests your attention is divided. You've been leaving early, canceling meetings, appearing distracted during strategic discussions. Victoria kept her voice level. I've left work at 6 instead of 9 on several occasions. I've rescheduled 2 meetings, both times providing advance notice and valid reasons. And I challenge you to show me a single strategic discussion where I was anything less than fully engaged. David slid a folder across the table. We also have evidence that you've been involved in a relationship that may be affecting your judgment. Victoria opened the folder and saw the photos of her with Marcus and Emma. She had expected this, but seeing her private moments documented and presented as evidence still felt like a violation. My personal life is exactly that. Personal. One of the other board members, a man named Harrison, spoke up. Victoria, we're not trying to interfere in your personal life. We're simply concerned that this relationship with someone so far outside your professional circle might be a distraction, or worse, a liability. What if this man is using you for your money or connections? Victoria felt anger flash through her, hot and bright. Marcus has refused every offer of financial help I've made. He won't even let me pay for dinner most nights. He has no interest in my connections or my money. He loves me for who I am, not what I have. That's more than I can say for most people in my life. Walter folded his hands on the table. Victoria, we respect your passion, but the reality is that as CEO, your life is not entirely your own. Your choices reflect on this company, and frankly, the optics of you dating a single father who makes a fraction of your income raises questions about your judgment. Victoria had been prepared for many accusations, but hearing them spoken so plainly still took her breath away. These men who sat in their expensive offices and made decisions about millions of dollars thought they had the right to judge her heart. She stood up slowly, drawing herself to her full height, and when she spoke, her voice was steel wrapped in silk. Gentlemen, let me be very clear about something. I have given this company 15 years of my life. I have sacrificed my marriage, my health, and countless opportunities for personal happiness in service of Sterling Dynamics. Under my leadership, this company has thrived beyond anyone's expectation, including my own. But I am also a human being, and I refuse to apologize for finding love with a good man who happens to make less money than I do. She looked at each board member in turn. You want to talk about judgment? Let's talk about the judgment it takes to build a company from nothing. Let's talk about the judgment it takes to navigate a male-dominated industry where every decision is questioned and every success is attributed to luck. Let's talk about the judgment it takes to recognize that working yourself to death is not noble. It's stupid. She paused, letting her words sink in. Marcus Chun is a single father who has raised an incredible daughter while building his own business. He's kind, intelligent, and treats me like an equal partner, not a trophy or a resource to exploit. If you think loving someone like that reflects poorly on my judgment, then perhaps the problem is with your judgment, not mine. The room was silent. David's smug expression had faded, replaced by something that looked like panic. Walter was staring at her with an unreadable expression. Harrison looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. Victoria pressed her advantage. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to either trust that I can balance my personal and professional lives, or you're going to fire me. And if you fire me, I will hold a press conference within the hour explaining exactly why I was let go. I will tell the world that Sterling Dynamics believes women cannot have both successful careers and happy relationships. I will make you the poster children for outdated corporate sexism. And then I will watch your stock price plummet as every talented woman in this company walks out behind. The silence that followed Victoria's ultimatum was deafening. She remained standing, her hands resting on the back of her chair, her spine straight and her chin high. She had laid her cards on the table, and now all she could do was wait. Walter Kemps's face had gone through several shades of red during her speech, and for a moment, Victoria thought he might actually have a heart attack right there in the conference room. But then something unexpected happened. He started to laugh. It was a dry, rusty sound, as if he hadn't genuinely laughed in years, and it startled everyone in the room. David looked horrified, clearly not understanding what was happening. The other board members exchanged confused glances. Walter shook his head slowly, still chuckling. Well played, Victoria, very well played. You've got more spine than I gave you credit for. Victoria didn't relax her stance. I'm not playing, Walter. Every word I said was true. I know, he said, his amusement fading into something more serious. That's why it worked. He looked around the table at the other board members. Gentlemen, I think we've made a mistake here. We've let David's personal agenda cloud our judgment. David's face went pale. Walter, I was simply trying to protect the company's interests. Were you? Walter asked, his voice turning cold. Or were you trying to position yourself for a promotion by eliminating the competition? David opened his mouth to protest, but Walter held up a hand. I've been in business for 50 years. I know a power play when I see one. You compiled a dossier on Victoria's personal life and presented it as a performance issue. That's not protecting the company. That's manipulation. He turned back to Victoria. You're right. We have no business interfering in your personal life as long as your professional performance remains exemplary, which it has. I apologize for this meeting and for questioning your judgment. The other board members quickly murmured their agreements, eager to distance themselves from David's failing gambit. Harrison spoke up, his voice apologetic. Victoria, I hope you'll forgive us. We should have recognized this for what it was. Your record speaks for itself. Victoria felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease, but she wasn't done yet. Thank you, Walter. But there's another matter we need to address. She turned to David, who was sitting frozen in his chair, his carefully constructed plan crumbling around him. David, you had me investigated. You violated my privacy and weaponize my personal relationships. That's not just unprofessional, it's unforgivable. David tried to recover, straightening in his seat. I was acting in the company's best interests. Victoria, if you can't see that, then perhaps your judgment is compromised after all. Walter slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. Enough, David. I've tolerated your ambition because you're good at your job, but this crosses every line. Victoria, what do you want to do here? Victoria had thought about this moment, had played out various scenarios in her mind. She could fire David on the spot, make an example of him. She could humiliate him the way he had tried to humiliate her. But as she looked at him, she realized that revenge would feel hollow. What she wanted was not to destroy him, but to ensure he could never do this to anyone else. I want David removed from any position where he has authority over people, she said calmly. He can stay on as a consultant if his financial expertise is that valuable, but he will no longer be CFO. And I want a company-wide policy implemented that protects employees' personal lives from this kind of invasion. What happens outside the office stays outside the office, period. Walter nodded. Consider it done. David, you're demoted effective immediately. Pack your office. You'll be contacted about a consulting arrangement, but your days of leadership at Sterling Dynamics are over. David stood up, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. You're making a mistake, Victoria, all of you. That relationship will destroy her focus eventually. Mark my words. Victoria met his eyes without flinching. The only thing destroying anyone's focus right now is your bitterness. David, I suggest you use this time to work on yourself because the only person you're hurting is you. David grabbed his folder and stalked out of the conference room, slamming the door behind behind him. The remaining board members sat in uncomfortable silence until Harrison spoke. Victoria, for what it's worth, I think you handled that with remarkable grace. I would have fired him on the spot. Victoria sat back down, suddenly exhausted. I considered it, but I don't want to be the kind of leader who rules through fear and retaliation. I want to be the kind of leader who builds a company where people can thrive both professionally and personally. That starts with me setting the example. Walter stood up and extended his hand across the table. Then set that example, Victoria. Keep building sterling dynamics. Keep being excellent. And for God's sake, invite your boyfriend to the company holiday party. It's about time we had some real people at those things instead of just corporate robots. Victoria shook his hand, feeling lighter than she had in days. Thank you, Walter. I appreciate your support. After the board members filed out, Jennifer burst into the room, having clearly been waiting anxiously outside. She took one look at Victoria's face and broke into a huge smile. You won. Victoria nodded, feeling tears of relief prick at her eyes. I won. We won. Jennifer hugged her boss tightly, something she had never done before. I'm so proud of you. You stood up for yourself and for all of us. She pulled back, her own eyes shining. Now go, call Marcus and tell him the good news. Victoria pulled out her phone with trembling hands and dialed Marcus's number. He answered on the first ring. How did it go? Tell me everything. I won, she said, her voice breaking. I told them off. I threatened them. And I won. David has been demoted. The board apologized. I get to keep you in the company. Marcus's relief was audible. Oh, thank God. I've been pacing my apartment for the last hour. Emma keeps asking why I'm so nervous, and I keep telling her it's because I drank too much coffee. Victoria laughed through her tears. Tell Emma that Miss Victoria is coming over tonight to celebrate, and tell her that her good luck card worked perfectly. There was a pause. And when Marcus spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. I'm so proud of you. You're incredible. You know that, right? I learned from the best, Victoria said. You taught me that some things are worth fighting for. Now I'm going to finish up here and then I'm coming straight to you. Don't make dinner. We're ordering the fanciest takeout you can imagine and eating it on paper plates. I wouldn't have it any other way, Marcus said. I love you. I love you too. See you soon. Victoria ended the call and looked at Jennifer, who was grinning like the Cheshire Cat. So, fancy takeout on paper plates? That's the dream right there. Victoria laughed. It really is. That evening, Victoria showed up at Marcus's apartment with bags of food from the most expensive restaurant in Manhattan, the kind of place where a single appetizer costs more than most people's weekly grocery budget. Emma opened the door and immediately threw her arms around Victoria's waist. Did you win? Did my card help? It helped tremendously, Victoria said, kneeling down to Emma's level. In fact, I told the whole board about you and your daddy, and they all agreed that you're both the best things that have ever happened to me. Emma beamed. I knew you could do it. You're like a superhero. Marcus appeared behind Emma and Victoria stood up to kiss him. The kiss was long and deep and full of relief and joy and promise. When they broke apart, Emma made a gagging sound. Gross. You guys are always kissing. Get used to it, kiddo, Marcus said, ruffling her hair. We're gonna be kissing a lot more now. They spread the takeout across Marcus's small kitchen table, the elegant food looking hilariously out of place in the modest apartment. Emma tried escargot and declared it weird, but okay. Marcus attempted to pronounce the French names of the dishes and butchered them so badly that Victoria laughed until she cried. They ate and talked and celebrated, and Victoria felt a sense of peace she had never known in her expensive penthouse. This was home, not a place, but people. This was family. After dinner, while Emma was in her room playing, Marcus and Victoria sat on the couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her. I was so scared today, Victoria admitted. Not of losing the company, but of losing you, of having to choose and knowing that no matter what I chose, I would regret it forever. But you didn't have to choose, Marcus said. You fought for both. That's what makes you extraordinary. Victoria tilted her head up to look at it. We're gonna face this again, you know. Not everyone will be as understanding as Walter ended up being. There will be people who judge us, who question our relationship, who think I'm with you for your money or you're with me for status. I know, Marcus said. And we'll deal with it together because that's what partners do. They face the hard stuff side by side. Victoria kissed him softly. When did you get so wise? He smiled. I have an excellent teacher. She's 8 years old and believes that love conquers all. Victoria laughed. Smart kid. We should probably listen to her. They should, Marcus agreed. They absolutely should. They sat there in the quiet comfort of his living room, two people from different worlds who had found common ground in the most unexpected way. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be more challenges, more judgment, more obstacles to overcome. But for tonight, they had won their first major battle, and they had won it together, and that was enough. 6 months later, Victoria stood in front of the mirror in her penthouse bedroom, smoothing down the front of her dress for the third time. It was a simple ivory sheath, elegant but not ostentatious, exactly the kind of thing she imagined wearing to a casual wedding. Except this wasn't someone else's wedding. This was hers. Emma burst into the room wearing a pale pink dress that twirled when she spun, which she proceeded to demonstrate immediately. Miss Victoria, you look like a princess. A real one, not the cartoon kind. Victoria smiled at the little girl who would officially become her stepdaughter in approximately 2 hours. Thank you, sweetheart. You look pretty amazing yourself. Is your dad ready? Emma giggled. Daddy is freaking out. He's changed his tie 4 times and he keeps asking Uncle Rebecca if his hair looks okay. Rebecca says he's being ridiculous, but in a cute way. Victoria laughed, her nervousness easing. That sounded exactly like Marcus. In the 6 months since the board meeting, their relationship had deepened in ways Victoria hadn't thought possible. They had moved in together. choosing a new apartment that was bigger than Marcus's place but less sterile than Victoria's penthouse. It had a yard for Emma and a home office for Marcus and enough space for all of them to breathe. They had blended their lives slowly and carefully, navigating the inevitable conflicts and adjustments with patience and humor. Marcus had proposed 3 months ago in the least romantic way possible. They had been grocery shopping, arguing about whether to buy name brand or generic pasta sauce. When Emma had rolled her eyes and declared that they fought like married people so they might as well actually get married, Marcus had frozen in the middle of the pasta aisle, looked at Victoria with her cart full of vegetables and her hair in a messy bun and said, "She has a point. Will you marry me?" Victoria had said yes before he had even finished the question, and they had kissed right there next to the marinara while Emma cheered and other shoppers applauded. It had been perfect precisely because it had been so ordinary, they had decided on a small ceremony, just family and close friends, in the botanical gardens where they had taken Emma for her 9th birthday last month. No press, no corporate obligations, just the people they loved witnessing commit to a life together. Victoria checked her phone and saw a text from Jennifer. "The flowers are perfect, the chairs are set up. Rebecca is keeping Marcus from having a nervous breakdown. Everything is ready. Are you?" Victoria typed back, "I've never been more ready for anything." She meant it. She had spent her life chasing success, measuring her worth by her achievements, believing that love was a luxury she couldn't afford. But Marcus and Emma had taught her that love wasn't a luxury. It was the foundation. Everything else was just built on top of it. There was a knock on the door and Rebecca entered, looking sharp in a charcoal gray suit. Rebecca had become one of Victoria's closest friends over the past months, the bridge between her old life and her new one. "You ready, boss?" Rebecca asked. "Your chariot awaits." By chariot, I mean a very nice car that Marcus insisted on renting even though you offered to provide one. Victoria smiled. "That's my stubborn man. Let's go before he changes his tie a 5th time." The drive to the botanical gardens took 20 minutes, and Victoria spent most of it holding Emma's hand while the little girl chattered excitedly about the ceremony. "I'm going to walk down the aisle first with Maboa's buttons. And then you come with your dad on the phone because he couldn't be here but he wanted to be part of it anyway. And then daddy is going to cry because he always cries when he's happy, and then you're going to be my mom. Not my real mom, but my mom. Mom, is that okay?" Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes. "That's more than okay, Emma, that's perfect." Her own father had indeed called earlier from his retirement community in Florida, apologizing again for not being able to travel but wanting to virtually walk her down the aisle. Her mother had passed away 5 years ago, and while Victoria missed her, she felt her presence anyway, a warm certainty that she would have loved Marcus and Emma. When they arrived at the gardens, Victoria took a moment to steady herself before stepping out of the car. The late spring day was perfect, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of blooming flowers. She could see the small gathering of chairs set up on the lawn, maybe 30 people total, all the people who mattered. Jennifer was there with her husband. Walter Kemp had surprised her by asking to attend, bringing his wife in a genuine warmth she hadn't known he possessed. Several of her executive team members had come, the ones who had supported her through everything. And there, standing at the makeshift altar under an arch covered in white roses, was Marcus. He wore a navy blue suit that made him look impossibly handsome, and when he saw her, his face lit up with such pure joy that Victoria felt her breath catch. Emma walked down the aisle first, carefully carrying Mr. Buttons in a small basket of flower petals that she scattered with great concentration. Then Victoria walked, her father's face on her phone held by Rebecca, who walked beside her in proxy. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," her father said through the phone, his voice thick with emotion. "Your mother would be so happy." When Victoria reached Marcus, he was indeed crying, just as Emma had predicted. She handed her bouquet to Rebecca and took both of his hands in hers. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi yourself," he whispered back, his voice shaky. "You look incredible." "You look pretty good yourself," she said. "Ready to do this?" "I've been ready since the pasta aisle," he said, making her laugh through her own tears. The officiant was a friend of Marcus's from college, a woman who had known him since before Emma was born and had watched him survive the heartbreak of his wife's abandonment. And she spoke about love as a choice, about commitment as daily practice, about families being built not just through blood but through showing up. Then it was time for vows. Marcus went first, pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket with shaking hands. "Victoria," he began, his voice breaking immediately. "I came to our first date 17 minutes late, sweaty and completely unprepared. I had my daughter in her pajamas and no idea what I was doing. You could have walked away, you should have walked away. But you didn't. You saw me at my most chaotic and you chose to stay." He took a shaky breath. "You've taught me that I don't have to choose between being a good father and being a whole person. You've shown Emma that strong women can be both powerful and kind. You've reminded me that broken hearts can heal if you're brave enough to let someone in. I promise to love you on your worst days. I promise to leave work early sometimes just to spend time with you. I promise to always be 17 minutes late to everything so you never forget how we started. And I promise to keep fighting for us no matter what challenges come our way." Victoria was openly crying now, and she didn't even try to wipe away the tears. She had prepared her own vows, had spent days crafting the perfect words. But standing there looking at Marcus and feeling Emma lean against her leg, the prepared speech felt wrong. She wanted to speak from her heart. "Marcus Chun," she began, her voice surprisingly steady. 6 months ago, I stood in a board meeting and told a room full of powerful men that loving you was the best decision I'd ever made. I meant it then, And I mean it even more now. You've taught me that success isn't measured in stock prices or quarterly earnings, measured in Sunday morning pancakes and bedtime stories and having someone who sees you, really sees you, and loves what they find. She looked down at Emma. You've both given me a family I didn't know I needed. You've made me laugh more than I've laughed in my entire life. You've shown me that home isn't a place or a thing you can buy. It's the people who hold you when you're scared and celebrate with you when you win and forgive you when you mess up. I promise to love you both fiercely and without reservation. I promise to be present, not just physically but emotionally. I promise to never take for granted the gift you've given me, and I promise that every decision I make will be made with our family in mind, because you're not just part of my life now, you are my life. The officiant smiled through her own tears. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Marcus, you may kiss your bride. Marcus pulled Victoria close and kissed her deeply, and their small gathering erupted in applause and cheers. Emma threw her remaining flower petals into the air with such enthusiasm that they landed on everyone nearby, and the moment was perfect in its joy and chaos. At the reception, which was just a simple lunch at a nearby restaurant they'd rented out, Victoria found herself watching Marcus dance with Emma, both of them laughing as he spun her around. Walter Kemp appeared beside her, holding a glass of champagne. You made the right choice, he said quietly. Both choices, actually. The man and the stand you took. You've made sterling dynamics better by making yourself whole. Victoria clinked her glass against his. Thank you, Walter, for taking a chance on, for supporting me when it mattered. He smiled. I should be thanking you. You reminded an old man that there's more to life than balance sheets. My wife has already informed me that we're taking a real vacation this summer, first one in 15 years. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Victoria found a quiet moment alone with Emma. The little girl was tired, her head drooping, but she looked happier than Victoria had ever seen her. Thank you, Emma, Victoria said softly. For what? Emma asked sleepily. For being brave enough to whisper to me that first night, for telling me about your dad, for giving me a chance to be part of your family. Emma smiled, her eyes already closing. You're welcome, but it was really Mr. Buttons' idea. He told me you were nice. Victoria laughed and kissed the top of Emma's head. Well, tell Mr. Buttons thank you too. Later, as Victoria and Marcus prepared to leave for a short honeymoon weekend, Emma hugged them both tightly. Love you, Daddy. Love you, Mom. Mom, have fun, but not too much fun. Marcus laughed. Where did you learn that, Uncle Rebecca? Emma said matter-of-factly. As they drove away, Victoria looked back at Emma waving from Rebecca's arms, and she felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. She had built an empire, proved herself in a world that doubted her, and achieved everything she had set out to achieve professionally. But this messy, chaotic, beautiful family, this was her greatest accomplishment. Marcus reached over and took her hand. What are you thinking? He asked. I'm thinking that being 17 minutes late was the best thing that ever happened. He smiled. To both, and as they drove into the sunset, two people from impossibly different worlds now bound together as one family, Victoria knew that love hadn't just conquered their obstacle, it had transformed them both into something better than they had been alone, and that was the real magic all along.